Hello. You guys hear me okay? Great. So excited to be here. I'm excited to actually share with you this CISO Maturity Model. It was introduced to me about 7 years ago, and a lot of CISOs actually don't even know it exists. So I thought it would be really good to share that with you and how I've leveraged it over my career. Unfortunately, it means I have to talk to you a little bit about my background and experience, which will make a lot more sense when I talk through my slides. So this year is 27 years for me in cybersecurity. I'm born and raised in San Francisco. My first job out of university was with Ernst & Young. I was an ethical hacker, and that's how I got into cybersecurity. I jumped around a little bit in the Silicon Valley, of course, and then I landed at Deloitte. I was there for a little over 6 years as part of their security and privacy practice. And then after Deloitte, I joined EA, the video game company, Electronic Arts, right? A dream job for me. I loved it so much. I was there for 8 years. First 4 years, I was the director for governance, risk, and compliance. And then the last 4 years, they promoted me to my first global CISO role, which is quite exciting. They moved me out from San Francisco to the UK at that point because we were building out a 24/7 SOC in Romania at the time. So it was quite exciting for me to do that. But after 8 years, I felt like it was a good time for me to kind of look around. I'm not sure if you guys remember, but in October 2015, there's a company called TalkTalk in the UK. It's a telecommunications company. You might remember it because they suffered the biggest data breach in UK's history at that time before GDPR. So that was quite interesting times. So anyways, long story short, a few months after their data breach, they reached out to me and they asked me if I would go for their CISO role. So I was there for 5 years, helping rebuild the brand, rebuilding trust with their customers. It's quite exciting times to join after a data breach. We know it's very fun when you get that, right? All the support that you want after a data breach. And then about 5 years ago, Deliveroo came knocking, which is like a Careem here in Saudi Arabia. So I've been with Deliveroo for about 5 years now. I joined around their IPO, so it's been quite an exciting journey for me. When I joined Deliveroo 5 years ago, I was the third FTE in the security department, and we've grown it over to 68 people now. And then just last month, we got acquired by DoorDash, which is a US brand, so we're in the midst of all of our integrations. Quite exciting times. All right, so now moving on to the cyber maturity model. So I never even knew this existed, right? So why is it here? So essentially, a lot of executive recruiters, they go and meet with other companies and they said, hey, I need a CISO, right? But we all know that there's different types of CISOs out there, depending on the industry, depending on the size of the company, et cetera. So essentially, a lot of these exec search companies, and I cited the two that I've used, they pull together this maturity model so when they meet with their clients, they have a better understanding of the level of CISO that they want, right? So this helps determine what kind of experience that the candidate requires in order to get the right skill set for what the company is looking for, and obviously it influences compensation as well. So when I looked at this model, I thought to myself, wow, this is so interesting, right? I bet you a lot of CISOs don't know about this. So I decided to kind of use it myself, and I'm telling you how I used it, right? So first off, I assessed my 3 CISO roles, my current one, as well as some of my future ones, against this maturity model. For any existing roles, I look at where I'm at and how I can kind of expand the remit and look for opportunities to kind of improve that. For future roles, I look to kind of ask really specific questions for when I'm interviewing to understand where that company is putting that CISO role. Now, this is the really important thing, so that's the last bullet. It's really hard to not try to take this personally, right? It's really about where the company has put this role, not really about your skill set or your abilities, right? So what I mean by that is, the day I leave Deliveroo, the day I leave, they're gonna backfill me with another CISO, right? And that CISO will be at this level. So it's less about me, again, it's where they're putting this role at this company. All right, so this is the maturity model from 1 to 5. And you see some of them use a 1 to 4, but I prefer the 1 to 5 model. Now, the interesting fact is, when the headhunter introduced this model to me, he mentioned in the UK alone, 70% of the CISOs that he sees is level 1, right? So when companies come to him, startups, fintechs, et cetera, and they say, hey, I'm looking for a CISO, it's usually level 1. The other interesting fact, and this is about 5, 6 years ago, he mentioned level 5, he's not aware of any CISO level 5 in the UK. The vast majority of the CISOs that he sees that are level 5 are actually in the United States, right? And I'll get to that. So starting from level 1, so a level 1 CISO, typically you're seen to be like an IT problem, right, cybersecurity. You oftentimes report directly to like a CIO. Your level of influence is usually within the IT function, and it's very kind of transactional, audit-led. That's primarily what you're working on. When you go to level 2, that's when you're starting to see cyber to be more than an IT problem. In fact, a lot of your engagements are with stakeholders outside of IT. So you start meeting with people team, finance team, legal, privacy. You might start appearing at the board or audit committee, or even start putting together materials for that. You start acting more relational and reactionary, and then also a little bit more knowledge around GRC and risk management, and you weave that into your day-to-day. When you get to level 3, that's when you start having stronger relationship skills. You get more comfortable at the board level. In fact, sometimes you have a more regular update to the board. You're more change-oriented. You can innovate a bit more. You have more relationships with your industry peers. That's quite important. And then you have a good awareness of what your company risk appetite actually is. Now, when you get to level 4 and level 5, that's when you're getting a little bit more strategic, right? You start getting more involved with like critical and highly confidential decisions, like an M&A, for instance. And then when you get to level 5, then you get to be really more of a trusted advisor to the executive. Oftentimes, a level 5 CISO reports directly to a CEO. You're oftentimes looked at a trusted advisor to the board, so regular updates to the board. And the last one is you're a very good candidate for like an NED role or a non-executive director role. So what have I done to do this? So essentially, I've had 3 CISO roles, and I basically mapped that to this maturity model just so you get a flavor of where it's at, right? So when I was at EA, I was a CISO there from 2012 to 2018. I put myself as a level 2, and you'd be surprised, right? My team was 80 people, right? But if I was really honest with where EA put that CISO role, I would put it as a level 2 at that point. Why? I reported to a CIO who reported to the CTO. I had good support across the business, not just in IT, so that was good. I did support the board updates, but it was very rare that I was invited to actually the board meeting. It was typically either the CIO or the CTO doing it. So I did feel like there's a bit of a conflict of interest at times. Overall, very good security risk management. In fact, that's one of the biggest pillars that we had as part of our security function. I was not involved in any mergers of acquisitions. Also, when we did a lot of studio closures, like that's very common at EA or any video game company, I found out literally the day that the public found out that we were closing a studio. So of course, my team was very reactionary in nature, and that's why I put that as a level 2. Now, my next CISO role was at TalkTalk, right? So I had to do this. I had to put pre-breach, right? So this is before my time. I think they were at 1.5, right? Why? There was actually no CISO role. They had a director of security, and he was reporting into the CTO. Security was mainly a tech problem. It wasn't really seen as a problem outside of tech, essentially. They didn't have a SOC. They had an MSSP. Obviously, it wasn't working too well. Limited board updates, limited executive updates, very weak on the GRC front of things, and again, not involved in the restricted projects. And then the data breach happened, right? Okay, so I've come in now, post-data breach, very exciting times. I would put it as a level 3.5. So I was there from 2016 to 2021, post-breach. Now, officially a CISO role, I was reporting directly to a COO. That was the best I've ever had, because guess what? The CTO was my peer, right? That was kind of the best situation I've ever had. We migrated away from the MSSP to a 24/7 SOC. I had a bi-monthly PLC security board. I had a monthly security committee. I was involved in a lot of the restricted projects. So when we had like a round of redundancies, I knew months in advance before that. They required me to get DV clearance. So in the UK, that's one clearance higher than top secret. And the reason why they needed me to do that was because I was there during the whole Huawei security debacle, right? Which is quite exciting to do that. So I was involved in a lot of governmental work. And then the last year I was there, I got board approval to do security as a service. So what was quite exciting is, in the telecommunications space in the UK, there's a lot of other telcos that actually sell security services to their business customers. And I always knew that that would be a good thing to do for TalkTalk, but obviously when I joined, it was all about recovering from the data breach. But the last year was a good period because we matured our function. We didn't actually lose any business customers as part of the breach. And today, they're actually now a profit center instead of just being a cost center because we have a lot of businesses actually buying security services from TalkTalk, which has been really amazing. And then the third one is my current role right now at Deliveroo. I give it a 3.5 as well. So I'm there from 2021 to now. I report to the CTO. The CIO is my peer. Our NIST maturity when I joined was about a 1.5. Today, we're a little over a 3, which has been an amazing journey for us. We have a quarterly audit committee update. I have an annual board update as well. I'm very much involved in restricted projects. So when we're opening up in a new market, when we opened up in Qatar, for instance, a few years ago, I was aware of it a few months in advance. I'm also very much aware of our cyber risk appetite. In fact, this is probably the most mature I've ever had in any company, right? So because we're a publicly traded company at Deliveroo, in our annual report, we have 11 principal risks that everyone can see, right? One of those principal risks is cybersecurity. And every year, they run a session with all the execs, and I'm invited to this, to actually review all the 11 principal risks again, cybersecurity being one of them. And we actually vote. We vote on our risk appetite, right? Which is really exciting. Dare I say, kind of fun, too. And for each year now, cybersecurity has been the lowest risk appetite of all 11 principal risks. So what that means is that in order for us to be within risk appetite, we need to have a higher level of maturity to do that. So because the risk appetite at the exec board level is crystal clear, I'm able to use that to drive momentum across the business around that because the board is expecting us to do that, right? So that's been really helpful. And the last thing is we're also looking to do security as a service with some of our restaurant partners, which is quite exciting. All right, so this is how I reverse engineer this for any of my future roles. So about 5 years ago, when I knew about this maturity model, and because I had such a fun time at TalkTalk with all the support that I've always wanted in security, if I moved to somewhere else, I didn't want to lose that support. I'm a bit spoiled, right? So what I did was I reversed engineer this framework, and I created with a set of questions. So these are literally the questions I asked during my 8 rounds of interviews when I was interviewed for Deliveroo. 1, as the CISO, do I have board and audit committee support? Am I expected to give updates? And the answer was yes. So it's an annual board update plus quarterly updates to the audit committee, which is obviously a subset of the board. Next question, do I get involved in restricted projects? Absolutely. So not only is it around like redundancies, so we're worried about data exfiltrations of disgruntled employees, to when we are opening in a new market or when we're exiting market. I know about this months in advance so I can prepare my team for these controls that we need to put in place. Who are the key stakeholders to the CISO role? This was really important, but guess what? I didn't actually have to ask this question because the 8 rounds of interviews of all the people they showed me really showcased who are my stakeholders. Because not only did I have VPs of engineering that I was meeting and the CTO, I met with general counsel, I met with the DPO, I met with the people leader, I met with a number of people outside of tech. So that spoke volumes to me of how important this is outside of IT, right? Is the company risk appetite for cybersecurity clear and understood? And the answer is yes. They didn't really have this very formal process yet, but we kind of talked through that and why it's important. And I believed it was important to kind of talk about like risk tolerance. So we had a good discussion around how we're going to leverage risk tolerance and how they would support me on that. And it was a lot of kind of head nodding, so that was very good. And the last one is really around, is cyber seen as an IT problem, or does the rest of the business acknowledge its need, right? So definitely seen more than just an IT problem. The rest of the business, it's very important for them to be part of it. And one of the things that we've been doing is a few things. One is, we've had our share of security incidents in the UK. A few years back, Uber had a big data breach. Just earlier this year, Marks and Spencer's and a few kind of retailers also had big data breaches as well. What the company has allowed me to do is actually go in front of a firm-wide, so in front of all 4,000 employees, and kind of talk through how these incidents have really impacted these companies. But also, we basically did a gap analysis of all the ways that they got into Uber and they got into M&S, did a gap analysis against our own environment, and really had an ability to do a call to action to all the employees about what they can do to prevent it from happening to us. So having that space at a firm-wide is quite important. So again, seen more than just an IT problem. The other example I have is, each year we go through a very kind of vicious business planning cycle about all the security projects that we want to do for the following year. Great, right? So after that, sometimes the momentum kind of dies off, right? So I decided to do something else. I introduced something called security roadshows last year. So security roadshow, essentially, we created a bunch of slides that we wanted to just go through various key stakeholders about how our roadmap is going to impact them, right? But we had two kind of tricks up our sleeve, right? So one is when we're speaking with the people team, the finance team, different tech teams, et cetera, right? We wanted to make sure that the content was very specific and bespoke to them, right? So when we talked to the people team, we talked about some of our security awareness campaigns that we're looking to do, how we want to get 100% on security training, for instance. All these things that are very specific to the people team and not bore them with the roadmap of everything else. I think that's where we go wrong, right? I think we show people too much information about our security roadmap that's really not relevant to them, and then you kind of lose interest there. So that was a smart move to just do something that's very specific to that particular department. The next thing is a small thing, but it was quite powerful. To do the roadshows, instead of setting up specific kind of meetings for these teams to come to us, right? So for instance, the security roadshow for the people team, rather than us setting up the meeting and them coming to us, I decided I wanted to go to them, right? And by doing that, I basically reached out to all of my peers across senior stakeholders in the business, right? So the chief people officer, the CFO, the chief technology officer, and I told them what I'm about to do. Guaranteed, all of these leadership members have their own leadership team, right? Weekly. Everyone has it, right? So instead of you coming to me, I asked for 20 minutes on their agenda for their leadership team. I'm coming to you, right? And I think that serves as two really powerful messages. One, it shows that leader is supportive of security, right? I'm in their agenda, that's one. And two, it shows their support for security overall, just because I'm allowed to have some space in their agenda. And those little two things have been so powerful that we're looking to do that again, because the engagement that we have this past year off the back of that has been really great. Thank you for your time. I'll be around if you guys want to chat, but that's it for me. Thank you.